Welcome to today's Parent Corner video. My name is Cassandra Wilson, and I am the Senior Associate Director of Programs at the Kinney Center for Autism Education and Support. In today's topic Parent Corner video, we're going to discuss sleep disturbance, and I'll provide an overview as well as some strategies to manage at home. Before we begin, I always like to point out that if you are working with a BCBA or treatment team, please consult with them or a medical provider if you would like any additional information and a more targeted program to address this issue. So let's get started. First, in this discussion, I will provide an introduction and prevalence of sleep disturbance, talk about the impact on behavior, some tips for improvement, as well as some additional resources for more information. So first, let's address what is sleep disturbance. According to the American Psychiatric Association, sleep disorders can be simply defined as problems with the quality, timing, and amount of sleep. And according to the International Classification of Sleep Disorders, there are actually 6 major categories of sleep disturbance. That includes insomnia, sleep-related breathing disorders, central disorders of hypersomnolence, circadian rhythm sleep-wake disorders, parasomnias, and sleep-related movement disorders. So the prevalence of sleep disturbance or sleep problems in neurotypical children is around 25% of all children. However, this is highly increased with children on the autism spectrum. The prevalence of sleep problems actually ranges from 40 to 80% of all children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. So seeking medical advice. As a behavior analyst, it's important that I always recommend to families to rule out any underlying medical causes. So variations in sleep patterns can also, in medical terms, be attributed to things such as acid reflux, respiratory issues or sleep apnea, anxiety, or medication side effects. So it's very important for those that are experiencing any of these issues that you make sure that it's not attributed to the medical cause. Also, if you are starting a new medication, please consult with your psychiatrist or medical provider to be clear on what the side effects are in relation to a sleep disturbance, especially if you have a child who's already struggling with sleep issues prior to starting medication. So the impact of inadequate sleep. As we know, lack of sleep can affect us in many different ways. Some of those ways include increased irritability, difficulty focusing, changes in appetite, reduced activity level, increased repetitive behaviors, and of course, family stress. So before we talk about some specific tips, the simple baseline procedures that you can do to address this is first, collect the data of actual sleep times. So parents, this is something that can easily be done. A lot of times we put our kids to bed and we realize that they actually haven't fallen asleep. So one way to do this is to actually record the time that they've fallen asleep when possible. So of course you may not catch the actual moment, but if you can catch a roundabout time that they are actually starting the phases of sleep, that would be helpful. Also, try to document the duration of sleep. So sometimes you may find that the learner may be falling asleep, but then waking up several times through the night. So it's important to get an idea about the full length of time that they are actually getting. So you may have to add up those different sleep segments to calculate how much sleep they've actually gotten through the night. Also, please take note of the activities completed prior to going to sleep. Again, this can be useful to establish any ideas or patterns that may be surrounding either the sleep disturbance or the successful nights of full restful sleep. An important strategy is to always establish a routine. So try to create a schedule or routine to follow every night. So of course, this is going to vary according to the learner, but it often consists of the important steps that can be or should be completed prior to bedtime. So I have here a picture of a basic schedule of what can be done prior to going to bed. And it's important to establish this routine as this helps to train the brain as well to follow a certain pattern and sleep to follow. An important note for parents, be sure to set enough time to complete these activities prior to the desired bedtime. So if it takes your learner more than a half an hour, you want to schedule accordingly with the schedule so that they're not running into their established bedtime or desired bedtime. So modify the environment. So it's important, of course, to minimize the volume in the home. So that includes the television, games, music, voice level, etc., especially if you have more than one child or more than one adult in the home during sleep time. Also, ensure that lighting is reduced as needed. Sometimes it's okay to have a night light, but you may want to try lamps instead of overhead lights. You may want to look at the moonlight, how that's coming into the child's room. All those different things can have an impact on falling asleep. Also, a common one, make sure that the bedding is adjusted according to room temperature. So if you don't have a fan or you notice that your child or adult is kind of waking up sweaty, try to modify their bedding accordingly or modify the room temperature if possible. It could be possible that they're waking up or not getting a good sleep because they're actually uncomfortable through the night. So that's sort of a preliminary step that you can do to kind of have some success with this off of the ground. Also, an important thing to note, limit or eliminate the use of TV or electronics prior to bedtime. These are often stimulating activities, and sometimes prior to that or following that, it takes a while for the brain to kind of relax and to fall asleep. So it's important that if you're establishing that bedtime routine, you try to eliminate the TV or iPads or anything like that prior to starting that, just so the brain has enough time to kind of calm down. Another important thing to note, monitor the fluid intake before bed, especially if you have a learner that gets up through the night because they have to go to the bathroom or gets up because they've actually urinated on themselves while they're sleeping and it makes them uncomfortable. So a good rule of thumb is to modify or decrease the liquid intake after 8 p.m. Of course, you're going to modify this accordingly, so you may have to implement this maybe at 7, or if you have someone that kind of likes to drink through the night or has to take certain medications, you can just kind of adjust accordingly. But you're going to make sure that you monitor so that it's not an excessive amount and decreases the need to wake up during the night. Also, an important thing to implement in your bedtime schedule, put a bathroom trip in that schedule and try to put it as close to before entering the bed as possible, just so that the child or individual is able to empty their bladder efficiently. This will also, as I mentioned, assist with minimizing nighttime accidents. So responding to wake-ups. This is very important. So monitor your response to wake-ups. Try to redirect as quickly as possible. I know for younger children, sometimes it's a lot easier for parents to just welcome them into your bed. However, this can become a negative impact in your routine because if the child likes to get into bed with you, it's actually reinforcing the problem. So however you determine that wherever you want them to sleep in your home, try to redirect them back to that area as quickly as possible. Avoid turning on lights or providing any stimulating activities. Also, if the individual or child is able to use the bathroom on their own or get a drink on their own during the middle of the night, make sure you remind them to return to bed immediately after doing so. It's very easy for children to get distracted or excited in the moment, and once their brain starts kind of stimulating again, it's very hard to retrain that to go to sleep. So make sure that you remind your learner or give them cues that once they're done, they should return back to bed without any additional activities included in that. So of course, in summary, if you're concerned with any significant sleep concerns, please seek medical advice. You can always consult with your treatment team or BCBA to assist with the routine and schedule development, as well as more intensive strategies such as a phased bedtime procedure. Also, be patient. It's very hard, especially for families. You deal with a lot of stress, and it's very tiresome, especially if you're going through a period of restlessness or your child is not sleeping for a long extended period of time. But implementing a bedtime procedure does take time. It does take consistency, but you have to be patient as well. And again, as I mentioned, be consistent. Try to stick to the same thing as hard as it may be. Of course, it's okay to adjust in certain areas, but you want to make sure you're being as consistent and thorough throughout the entire process. So here are some resources. There are several websites that provide a comprehensive overview of sleep disturbance and provide some preliminary steps that you may feel comfortable implementing in your home. Of course, if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the Kinney Center.